What I do in these now is I go kind of really quickly at the start to give you an overview of kind of what's going to be on the test, telling you like what types of questions, general ideas, and then afterwards I kind of go section by section, reword some test questions for you to kind of figure out, get some ideas to study, and then at the end I give maybe 10 minutes for people to ask questions. So since like you have to leave, and then Lane has to leave, some of you also have to leave, because of that, I want to start with just the general overview to give you some direction, and then you can look up the specifics on your own, okay? So, and is it recording? It's
Yep.
good? So those of you that are watching this on YouTube, what you need to do is write down a summary in a notebook piece of paper, including time references. So on the left-hand side, write down 2 minutes in, you talk about whatever it is. And then keep doing that as you go so that I know that you watched it. You hand that in the day of the test, you get 5 bonus points. Has to be when you show up to take the test. Everybody here gets 5 bonus points on the test just for being here. So the test itself is 40 questions that are random, like some of them are multiple choice. There's 20 multiple choice. Then there's then there's one section of matching, and then there's a section of identification. So again, 20 multiple choice. Looks like 12 matching, and then 9 identification. Maybe it's 11 matching and 9 identification. Whatever, roughly that, okay? Roughly 20 questions multiple choice, roughly 12 matching, roughly 9 identification. The matching section has a heading that's just like the quizzes we've been doing in class, where it says like A is biological, B is behavioral, C is cognitive, D is psychoanalytical, E is humanistic, and then A, B is sociocultural. Then it would give you a statement, or maybe a theorist, or a problem, or whatever, and you have to identify which theory, which contemporary approach it most relates to. So to cue you in on what the correct one is for that, if you remember some kind of key words that are associated with each theory, that will help you out. So what are some of the key words? Let's just start with the psychoanalytical perspective. What are some key words that you want to look for that's going to help you understand if something's coming from the psychoanalytical perspective?
Subconscious.
Subconscious or unconscious. Okay, Freudian, because that Freud was the guy that came up with it. What else? I'd say pleasure or aggression. Because remember, Freud thought that those, the Thanos, or Thanatos, and Eros were the 2 motivating factors. So if you see those key words, that's going to help you to determine that it's about that. So now, some people got confused. You would see something that says, the subconscious elements of a personality are what shapes someone's behavior. Some people, when they got that question wrong, guessed behavioralism or behaviorism. Why is it not that?
It's subconscious.
Because it says subconscious. For behavioral, that's all about how people respond to stimulus in their environment. So I look at somebody, let's say I look at Austin and I go like this. See, she smiles back and kind of giggles. If I look at Jasmine, right, and I just go like this, she laughs also. So the big determiner of her behavior is how I'm acting from that perspective, okay? What are some of the keywords for cognitive?
Like knowledge.
Thinking,
Organization.
knowledge, not necessarily.
Isn't it how you
Desire.
mental process?
Yeah, anything mental process.
Yeah.
So thinking, memory, perception, knowledge, that's probably going to be related to the cognitive perspective. What if it says it's because of like the genes that your parents passed on, or a physiological characteristic?
Biological.
Biological. What if it says something about your surroundings, or like how people influence you? Yeah, if it's not about stimulus, if it's about your culture or your environment, like not your environment, your culture, your society, sociocultural.
So is sociocultural like a branch of behavioral? Or is it its own thing?
No, not necessarily. Were you in class when I used the church example? Was that a different example?
Oh yeah, I remember.
Okay, so let's take why you would go to church, okay? Most churches in this area, when you go there, they have a friendly greeter. they have like coffee or snack time, donuts, whatever. So like at our church, when the pastor stands up at the end and says, okay, stand for the benediction, my daughter says, hooray, donuts. Like, one time she said that really loud and my wife was embarrassed. So it's like, please stand for the benediction. Hooray, donuts! Okay? So she's going because of the stimulus. Well, she's going because she gets dragged there. Okay? But not really dragged there. She likes to go. But she's going because the stimulus she likes, right? She's getting this response from the environment there. Jeff smiles, the greeter. She gets donuts. She gets to run around and play with her friends. That's rewarding to her. That would be reinforcement. That's the behavioral explanation. If she gets older and she decides to go because she was taught that was the right thing to do, her grandparents went, she's in a community where a lot of people go to church, etc., that's the sociocultural explanation, okay? So do you see how it's not because of like what somebody has done necessarily? Like directly, it's more about the values that she's picked up. That's the difference. So I've hit all of the main perspectives now. Again, I'll come back to those later. I just wanted to make sure I presented some for the people that need to leave. Okay? Now, for the essay questions, there's 3 essay questions. You get to pick one. This is, you do it in class. In sociology, we did take-home essays, and then I'd have like 100 questions per test. This one, since it's only 2 chapters, we have 40 questions, and then 1 essay question. Each essay is worth 20 points. The first essay presents a scenario regarding a typical student council fundraiser that they do around Valentine's Day, where they ask people to fill out surveys, and it's supposed to tell them who they're supposed to be compatible with. Have you ever heard of that?
Student council.
Yeah.
Huh?
It's not student council.
It used to be. Maybe they changed it. Okay.
Just saying.
Well, anyways, it says student council in this scenario, so whatever. So, what...
You guys walk in front of the camera?
Yeah. You are forever going to be...
I totally forgot
YouTube.
about
Hey,
it.
Kelly,
Yeah.
you gotta sign your name.
So,
And the period.
it gives you that scenario and asks you, would that be good research to figure out what the typical person in West Fargo likes in a relationship? And you have to explain yes or no and why. There's a little bit more to it, but that's the general outline of it. The second essay question has to do with mentalism and the trilogy of the mind. You're presented a scenario, and you have to explain that scenario using those concepts. The third scenario gives you another relationship issue and asks you to list the 4 goals of psychology and use those to explain the problem or the issue. Again, there's more to each one than that. I'm just giving you an overview. I'm not going to give you more specifics than that. Austin.
How long is an essay for you?
I would try to make sure at minimum 3 very well developed paragraphs. One where you do like an intro, one with a body, and one with a conclusion. If I was going to write it and I was doing the mentalism one, I would do 5 paragraphs. Because you remember the trilogy of the mind? There's 3 parts to that. So I'd do an intro. First paragraph would be cognitive factors, second, third, etc. They'd be each of the factors for the trilogy of the mind. Okay? But I'd say at minimum 3 really well developed paragraphs. Okay?
For the first one, how are you going about the scenario? Because I know the other 2, you have the 4 concepts and or the trilogy. But how do you...
Yeah, it basically just says, would it be good research? I'm not going to
Yeah.
give you any more details than
Okay.
that, I think, for this.
Okay.
Okay. So now, the rest, 20 of the questions are multiple choice, and these are a little bit of everything. So some of them are about like people, some of them are about like theories that built into modern psychology, some of them are about terms, okay? Some of the terms we talked about were basic science and applied science. Basic and applied science. So if you, again, I'm going to go quickly through some of these concepts, just kind of briefly list them. Then afterwards I'm going to ask if people have questions, I'll explain stuff. So if you understand that process, I think that will help, or the distinction between those 2. You also obviously would have to understand some of the key people associated with each theory. So that table that you guys built, I handed that back to, I think, pretty much every class. Maybe if people were gone, I didn't get it back to them or whatever. But even if you didn't get it back, if you can kind of think mentally that way, what's this theory? Who came up with it? What are some key words associated with it? That by itself, I think, is the biggest piece for this test specifically. So if you study that and then the notes, those 2 things, Obviously, the book will be a little bit, but I'd say to focus the table, the notes, then the book in priority. And of course, the review session would help too. Okay, so what's the difference between a hypothesis and a theory?
A hypothesis is like a guess of something, and a theory is something that has been proven.
Yeah, so a theory is something that has a lot of evidence behind it. It's not absolutely proven. Scientifically, if something's absolutely proven, they call it a law. So if you're in physics, there's something called like the law of thermodynamics. Have you guys heard of that before at all? But any other scientific laws anybody know of? So, but that's, if it's absolutely proven, it's a law. If it's got a lot of evidence, but it's not, then it'd be a theory. If it's not completely proven, if it's a guess, it's a hypothesis, okay? So which one's stronger? Which one has more evidence? A theory. Good. Okay. I'm going to give you some terms. I want you to tell me which theorist they're most associated with. Piaget, Skinner, or Freud. Piaget, Skinner, or Freud. Cognition.
Piaget.
Piaget. Subconscious.
Freud.
Skinner.
Freud. Conditioning.
Skinner.
Free association.
Freud.
Freud. Let's see. Memory.
Cognition. Wait, Piaget.
Piaget. Reinforcement.
Skinner.
Good. Kelly's got it down.
Here's a sheep right there.
She's looking at the sheet. Oh, that's all right. Okay.
I was-
Who's the guy that came up with the first psychology lab? Starts with a W.
Isn't it William James? Yeah.
No, William James is one of the guys that came up with the first psychology textbook. He was a professor at Harvard. It's Wilhelm Wundt. Yeah, German. Starts W, sounds like a V. So it looks like Wundt, but it's Wundt. Okay. Also, you should know who's associated with humanistic psychology as well. So who are those people?
Carl Rogers, Maslow.
Maslow and Rogers. What's the key distinction between, there's two key distinctions between psychoanalytical theory and humanism. What's one of them?
Humanism thinks people are inherently good.
And in the psychoanalytical?
The opposite.
Yeah, the id, the deepest parts of your personality, is selfish and wants what it wants now. If it gets frustrated, it's going to want to kick people's butt. So, that's number one. In humanism, people are basically good. In Freudian theory, people are basically selfish. What's another difference?
So psychoanalytical is where they're kind of selfish.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's another key difference? What's the key part of psychoanalytical theory? What shapes your behavior? Subconscious. In humanistic theory, you are like logically weighing out your choices. You have much more cognizant of a role of determining what you're going to do. So you're in control, not your subconscious. Okay, what are some, we talked about different research methods. I'm going to give you some examples, and I want you to tell me some strengths and weaknesses of those methods. What's a strength of an experiment? What makes that good?
Observable results, like data.
Yeah, it's easier to come up with hardcore data in the experiment. So in true experiments, most of them you're going to have at least two groups. You might have more than that, but you'll have at least two groups. What are those groups called?
A control group and an experimental group.
The control group and the experimental group. Now, let me give you a scenario, and I want you to tell me in that scenario what group is the experimental group and what's the control group. And I'll also use some of the terminology we talked about today. Independent, dependent variable. Talked about that yesterday also. It's in the reading. So let's look at the scenario I brought about in class where they had a group of people sitting around waiting to try to solve this complex puzzle. One group was watching like aggressive movies. The other group wasn't. And then they had them try to figure out this puzzle. And then as they were figuring out this puzzle as a group, they measured how many instances of frustrated, like aggressive behavior took place. In that instance, what's the independent variable? The what? The show. Whether or not they watched the show. What's the dependent variable?
You
how aggressive they were while they were doing the puzzle. Which group was the experimental group?
So the ones that walk.
The one that watched the show. Which one was the control group? The one that did not watch the show. Okay? So, in that instance, the benefit of that is you can better control variables. The weakness of an experiment is what?
The group, the people you get, like what if one group was more aggressive? Like what if you just happen to get a lot of aggressive people who watch the movie?
Right, so sometimes it's hard to sample. The group that you're studying is called the sample.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to get a good representative sample.
Right.
So that's one weakness. What else?
Is it that they don't represent everybody or something?
Yeah, if your sample's not good, that's kind of the same thing she said. If you go in and you're going to go do a puzzle in like a college setting, does that accurately represent like working on a basketball team or dance group or whatever trying to solve a puzzle? It's not really a real world scenario. So the biggest critique of an experiment is that people modify their behavior because it's not in a natural setting. Same thing with laboratory observations, right? The example I used in class was I randomly paired two people up and said, okay, imagine that you guys were in a relationship. I think I used Sarah and Matt in period 5, right? So I said, okay, you guys come in. We want to see how you guys behave related to each other. We put you in a laboratory. If you know you're being watched or you're just outside of your element, you're probably not going to act as normal as you would if you were in a relationship. But if you watch people in what's called naturalistic observations, the strength of that is they're probably going to behave more naturally. What's a weakness of that then?
There could be ethical concerns in it.
Yeah, depending on what you do to them, there could be ethical concerns.
You can't control like outside variables.
Yeah, you can't control outside variables. Exactly. Okay. What's the difference? Well, actually, let's do this pretty easy. I'll use small numbers to make it a little bit easy. So let's go 4, 6, 8, 6. Those are our 4 numbers, okay? 4, 6, 8, 6. What's the mode in that sample?
6.
Yeah. Let me add one more number. 4, 6, 8, 6, 10. 4, 6, 8, 6, 10. So the mode is what?
6.
6, because it's the most commonly occurring. What's the median?
6.
6.
6 is the median. Okay, and now how do we find the mean?
Add them all together.
Add them all together and then
Subtract the number of numbers.
Divide.
Yeah, add them together and divide. So if it's 4, 6, that's 10, plus 6 is 16, plus 8 is 24, plus 10 is 34. Divided by 5 would give us what?
5 point something.
6.7, something like that. Some different number, okay? So be able to look at lists. There's a few questions on here where it gives you a list of numbers, and you have to try to figure out what the median, mode, mean is. So you might have to do a little. You don't need a calculator for the list I've given you, so you'll be okay. Okay. So be able to do some simple math and identify which one the mean, median, and mode is. Okay. All right. Let's see. What is something that could affect the results of a study or a survey or whatever? What is that called? Something that could change. What's the general term
Variable.
for that? A variable. Good. So what's the one that experimenters manipulate called?
Independent variable.
Independent variable. And then what's the one that we're trying to observe the effect for?
The dependent variable.
Okay, so now somebody besides Kelly. I'm going to give you a scenario. I want you to tell me what the independent variable is. Let's use again some of the examples I've used from class before. The study where they were measuring how caffeine influences reaction time. Your reaction time, what would that be?
The
Dependent variable. The people that get the caffeine.
independent.
The people that get the caffeine, not the caffeine itself.
Experimental group.
The people that get the caffeine would be the experimental group. Somebody besides Kelly again.
Sorry.
What's the caffeine itself called?
Independent.
Independent variable. The group, the people that do not get the caffeine,
Control group.
control group. So there's like 4 or 5 questions about that. Make sure you have that really.
Okay, but if
narrowed
you
down also.
manipulate, wait a second. What's the caffeine?
In that example, the caffeine would be the independent variable.
Okay.
Is that still recording? Is it good? Looks like it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, let's say I'm in a study. Remember the example I gave you about how you would give people like a supplement and then have them lift and see if they could lift more weights? If I, as the researcher, know which people are getting the supplement, but the people don't right away, they don't find out till later, what type of study is that? Is that a single blind or
Double
a
blind.
double blind?
Single blind.
Single blind. If I don't know who's getting the supplement, what is that called? Double blind. Good. Now let's
You
say
as the
that.
experimenter?
Now, hold on a second. Let me finish this next point, and you can ask your question. Now let's say that I give some stuff out to people, but in reality, like one of them was just plain Gatorade, and Emily's bench actually goes up after drinking the plain Gatorade. She's like, yeah, I'm stronger because of this. What's that called?
Placebo.
Placebo effect. All right. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you explain the difference between single blind and double blind one more time?
Yeah, single blind is you're doing a study and only the researchers know who is getting exposed to the independent variable.
Okay.
And a double blind, neither the researchers nor the subjects know. They might find out later after the study, and probably to get it approved by an IRB for ethical reasons, you would probably have to notify them afterwards that they were exposed to the independent variable, but during the study, they don't know.
Okay.
Yep.
So like when kids put that germ thing and they come to your class and put a black light on your hands to see if the thing, we didn't know about that study, or we're not supposed to, so that'd be a single blind one.
Well, and the researchers don't know necessarily who all is exposed to it right away.
Oh, so then, but they know it's happening.
Do they know which people got the disease to start with?
Oh, I don't think so. So that'd be double blinded then if they.
Is that your mom does that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when she gives the people that are supposed to be the disease spreaders, does she know who starts with the disease?
No, I think she only puts it on railings and like water fountains.
Okay.
So I don't think she has a person start out by food.
Okay.
But she knows where it start. Like if she puts
Right.
it on the
She
railing.
knows where the areas are at.
This is referring to like the actual like,
Yeah.
patient, so
Well, in that instance, this is kind of a unique, it's not easy to put in either one
Yeah.
because she doesn't know the people that are going to get it right away, but she knows where it starts. So I don't think that would be a valid
Okay.
scenario that applies here necessarily.
so it doesn't.
Maybe I'm just thinking about it wrong, but I won't give you a scenario like that where it's kind of ambiguous, okay?
Okay.
It'll be pretty straightforward. Okay? All right. What were some of the approaches that kind of led into modern psychology? Let's get into that. So those were like the founding approaches. So for example, one of them was called Gestalt psychology. One was functionalist. Remember some of those concepts? So could somebody list like some of the theories that led into modern psychology? Just list them. Again, I gave you two of them. There's a couple other ones.
What were the two you gave us?
Gestalt
Functionalist and Gestalt.
and functionalist. If you look in your book, it would be, grab my book.
Is structuralist one?
Structuralist would be one. Let me grab the book so I can tell you what page it'd be on too.
Is the inherited traits one or no?
Inherited traits, yep. So it'd be, okay, if you look in your book on page number 15, it says Origins in Psychology. This would be for all of you guys as well. It's all of the headings in blue. So if you look on the bottom of page 15, Structuralist is the first, Functionalist, Inheritable Traits, and then Gestalt Psychology.
What page?
15.
Sorry.
Okay, so later in class, when we talk about sensation and perception, we're going to talk about something that's called synesthesia. I mentioned that briefly. Sir Francis Galton, the guy that came up with Gestalt psychology, is the guy that kind of discovered that. So basically, it's like people that see letters or numbers as colors. So they see the number and then they see it as a color. Even though it's in black, like ones are always red to them, twos are always green, blues or threes are always blue, etc. I don't know for them what color each one appears, and I think that's dependent on the person. But one of the clips that I'll show you later, I think we'll talk about that. I think it's fascinating. So with Gestalt psychology, his whole premise was that the sum total is greater, like the total experience is greater than the sum of its parts. So let's approach that or let's relate that to synesthesia. If let's say that Maddie is synesthesiac, I don't even know what the correct term would be, but she has that, okay? If she has that, she is able to see numbers in like certain colors and all that. It's not just the fact that she can see a 1 as a blue color and a 2 as a green and 3 as red, whatever. That by itself, like the reading the numbers and the colors, it's not like just those two things. It gives her like a greater advantage than just the sum of that related to other people. It affects her more deeply than just those things put together. That's one way of looking at Gestalt psychology. The analogy they use in the text, if you remember, is the pictures of the faces made out of fruit in paintings, moving lights, all of that. So when you're perceiving something, you don't perceive like the dots. You don't just perceive dot, 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 dot. You perceive it as a shape. Think also of when you were a little kid, you ever do the connect the dot puzzles? Or you ever look at like, I need more sleep. Stars in the sky, you relate them together. What are those called? Constellations, thank you. So constellations you don't see as like, oh, there's a star, there's a star, there's a star. Put together it's a bunch of stars, you see it as a shape, right? So that Gestalt psychology tries to seek how people create meaning out of collectively combining their perceptions
Like when
together.
you make shapes out of clouds and stuff?
Yeah, that'd be a good example. Yep. Yeah, or snow or whatever. Yep. Okay. What's it called? There's not that many questions about that part. Again, there's just a few pretty straightforward. What's it called if you do a statistical test and you prove statistically that two variables are related? Well, just that they're related is called a correlation. But if you prove that like one changes and it's influencing the other a certain amount. No, I should have phrased it a little differently. What if you phrase, okay, let's say I give a test to period 3, period 4, period 5, and then period 5 I start trying out something unique, a little bit of a different teaching method, and then we find out that they increased their test performance by 0.01%. But then later I try something else and their test performance goes up like 8%, 8 percentage point. What is that called then?
Talking about like validity.
Yeah, it's sort of
Correlation
Did you add
coefficient.
the extra syllable?
Validity.
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 Just like Fernaca, whatever with a P. Whatever.
Validity.
Validity. Yep. No, it's called significance, guys.
Oh.
It's statistically significant. So if a number changes and it's outside of like the margin of error, it's outside of something that could be due to chance, just random happenings, that's called statistically significant.
So couldn't it just been because of your teaching method? It could have just been because you had smarter kids in that class?
If it's not statistically significant, you could assume that it's due to something else.
But if it's stat significant, then...
That suggests that it could be due to my teaching method.
Okay.
But it could be due to, like, I tell you about it and you just believe in it more, so you're more confident and then you do better.
Mm-hmm.
What's that called then?
Placebo.
Placebo effect. Exactly. Okay. If two variables change at the same time, what is that called?
Correlation.
Correlation. If one variable goes up and another variable goes up, what type of relationship is that?
Positive.
Positive. If one goes up and one goes down, what's that called?
Negative.
Negative. What if both go down?
Positive.
Positive because
They're both going the same way.
they're both going the same way. Good. Okay, what's the term, the technical term for